Okay. All right. See here. All right. All right. Somebody's come in now. Somebody set the reminder. All right, then. All right, whoever there's watching, is the audio okay or is there something wrong? I'm not 100% sure. Is the audio good on your end? Let me know in the chat. Let's see. All right, another person here. Good. Beats live streaming alone. All right, Sajak. Yep. That's a yep on the audio, I'm assuming. So, all right, it's sounding like the audio is working on your guys' end. That's good. All right, double check a couple things here. Refresh. All right, then. Well, this is a general Q&A for this month's live stream. So whatever questions you have, let them rip. Let's see. Guess while I'm waiting for some questions to come in, just another reminder that I have a audience survey that I'm taking to help make questions, help make videos better for the future. So if you haven't taken the Casual Historian 2020 audience survey, it should be linked in the description of this video. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. So yeah, on Rissus TF, any questions you say? Yes, any questions. Garrett Allen, favorite number? I'm biased towards 7, but that's because my birthday is 7/7, so I'm biased towards that. Do you think African Americans will exit the Democratic Party? No time soon. No time soon. It would take some major changes over a long period of time. Like African Americans only became majority Democrat after a long period beginning with basically FDR up to Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s. So that was a 30-year transformation for the African Americans to become Democrats. So I don't think they'll switch to any other party anytime soon. Let's see. Is cereal just breakfast soup? If you want to make it that way. Mike Koss, hello from Greece. Well, hello, Mike Koss. Arthur M. What did you miss? You haven't missed much. It's only been a few minutes, just letting people ask whatever they want. This is a general Q&A, so it could be as deep or as shallow as you want these questions to be. See, Mike Koss, do you believe Christian dominionists have a strong influence in the Republican Party? Not really, no. The religious right doesn't really have a super strong influence over the Republican Party, I feel. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but from the outside looking in, that sounds crazy. But in reality, the Christian right within the Republican Party has always been more of just a... they've gone along with Republicans because they know the Democrats are actively hostile towards their beliefs and whatnot, while the Republicans are mostly indifferent, I find. Though they do they try to play it up during election times. So that's... yeah, so no, I don't think Christian dominionists have a big influence in America's Republican Party. See, on Rissus TF, do you think Rasputin was a fraud who liked getting demonetized? Yeah, he probably was. Keir Thurber, in all seriousness, what lingering effects of current U.S. foreign policy come from the Cold War era? Well, there's, of course, the traditional idea that is the military-industrial complex. This relationship between military contractors, those producing military goods and services, and foreign policy, that is a kind of a big one. You know, it's like, what's the point of having this big military if you're not going to use it? There's more need to use military gear if there is war. But contrary to some popular opinions, especially if you remember the Bush era, American foreign policy isn't really driven by economic policy in most cases. Like back in the 1970s, during the various Arab-Israeli wars, American oil companies sided with the Arab states, like every time. Since, Israel doesn't have oil, there's no reason for the oil companies to cozy up with Israel, and so they usually sided with the Arabs, which was something that the federal government didn't like. So, long-term effects of current foreign policy, the lingering effects of current U.S. foreign policy from the Cold War era, it's mostly just this whole, the United States needs to set up overseas bases thing, which is also part of that whole military-industrial complex, because the military-industrial complex doesn't just create war and war materials, it also creates a lot of jobs. People who work in the manufacturing of these goods, people who work on the bases or towns that grow up around military bases, provide services and goods for them. It's a large segment of the economy, and there are a lot of towns in the US and even abroad now where their economies are kind of centered around whatever US military base is there. All right. Sajak, do you think we're getting close to a civil war? I don't think so, at least not much of a shooty one. And it would be very different. It's like, unlike the American Civil War in the 1860s, that was, a group of states against the federal government. A current one would more look like just kind of general anarchy, I think. Garrett Allen, what's the symbol right behind you? Oh, if you're talking about the little flag there, that is the Nail and Gear flag. That is the official flag of the Hello Internet podcast, the podcast by YouTubers CGP Grey and Brady Heron. The podcast has been going on since 2014, I think, at the top of my head. And I think back in like 2015, 2016, they made their own flags, or had a flag referendum, and that flag design ended up winning. So they adopted official flag of the podcast. Okay, so yeah. All right, Mike Koss again. I would like your opinion in this one. 2020 is Trump again and Mitt Romney become a SOS. What would this mean for Republicans' future? I'm not entirely sure what you're asking here. If 2020 is Trump again and Mitt Romney becomes a SOS, what would this mean for Republicans' future? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by Romney becoming a SOS. So, not entirely sure what you're asking. Keir Thurber, if I had money, I'd donate it because HI is one of the best things on the whole internet. It is, if only it had content. They've been kind of in an unofficial dry spell for like most of this year. So, I mean, I enjoy getting, like Cortex, but, it'd be nice to have a Hello Internet every now and then. Oh, Mike Koss, Secretary of State. Would it be a compromise? I don't think Mitt Romney would serve as Secretary of State for Republicans. Like at this point, I do see Mitt Romney probably trying to run for the Republican nomination again in the future, but it would probably be at the earliest is like 2028, I think, if he tried to run again. But it's in a weird position. 2020 is going to shape the next decade of politics, I think, in one way or another, but I'm not 100% certain how yet. Stephen Blythe, have you been social distancing? What, you mean regular life? Ha ha, introvert jokes. Yeah, no, I've been social distancing. Luckily, I was able to go back to work back in May, and I show up to my work. It's a small office, so I show up there by myself in the afternoon, do my job, and then come home. So yeah, nothing much to do there, and most of the rest of my time is spent at home. And that's not too different than pre-pandemic times. The only difference is that pre-pandemic times, I would occasionally go to like Starbucks 2 or 3 times a week in the morning to do some writing and whatnot. But since that's not an option, I haven't been doing that. So I've been having to learn how to write at home with all the distractions that are here. See, say Jack. Adam M. Oh, hi. Hello there, Adam M. Say Jack. Would Cuomo beat Trump over Biden? I think most of the Democratic candidates could have beaten Trump, or at least especially now. Pre-pandemic, it was a toss-up. Like, I think Bernie could have definitely lost to Trump, but once again, the pandemic kind of saved the Democratic Party nomination, I think. So I think Cuomo could be, I'm actually not entirely certain now that I think about it. New York politicians have a hard time succeeding beyond the New York state level. You know, it's like Bill de Blasio, like the mayor, for some reason, the mayors of New York think they have the right to become president, even though no mayor of New York ever has, just because they're, ruling over the biggest city in the US. So, like Giuliani, de Blasio, and Bloomberg, they all lost. New York mayors, they all think they have the right to be president, and they're all end up being wrong. All right. Oh, hello there, ancient accounts. It's a miracle I'm up this late. I'm not a night owl. I have to wait for this for like 4 hours. Yeah, Biden is like the boringest candidate from my UK perspective. Well, I can imagine from a British perspective, he's definitely boring. It's like he's no Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn's at least interesting, if not frightening. The Melangeni, some name I can't pronounce. I'm sorry. Gugolathu. Yeah, I am butchering that name of yours. Sorry. May you please explain the history of Gentiles and Jews in the Gospel of Luke? Not right now. Not right now. I am definitely not prepared for that at this moment. Yes. New York politicians suck at national elections. Laughs at FDR. Yes. I have to double check, but I think FDR might be the last president from New York who actually, the last person from New York to actually become president. I have to double check that, but I think he might actually be the last one. And for him, he went from governor to president, not from mayor to president. That's the other thing about American elections, is that mayors do infamously bad at becoming president. Like I remember some of the funny commentary around like Pete Buttigieg, who was the mayor of that one, I think it was an Indiana or Illinois town. It's like some commentary on some news channels, like, I'm surprised that, Pete Buttigieg has done this well, that his sexuality hasn't been a big issue in this election. The other guy at the panel says, I'm surprised the mayor did this well in an election. Yeah, so that's the thing there. Jordanian Christian, what's up? What's up to you, Jordanian Christian? Dr. Khan blog, the current polls show a tightening of the race, plus Biden had no post-convention bump. Well, Biden was doing better than, Hillary had, so I don't think there's too much of a bump. The fact of the matter is, in modern politics, presidents have very high floors and also very low ceilings. That means they can't fall very low, but they also can't rise very high in the polls. We saw some of this with President Obama, but he had a little more sway in his poll numbers. Trump, on the other hand, has been consistently between like 39 and 45-ish%. So he's had a pretty steady approval rating. Pretty steady low, but it hasn't gone to the same lows that, say, like President George W. Bush or Bill Clinton or anyone before them had. See, Benjamin, clearly you're forgetting about the candidate who will change the U.S. and the world. Jeb. Ah, yes, a good old Jeb. 2016 election was a lot of mess, but the one thing I always said that was good about the 2016 election was that it basically destroyed the political dynasties that were the Bushes and the Clintons. You know, it's like there's this whole thing of like every Republican prior to Donald Trump's election, every winning Republican ticket since like 1952 had either Nixon or Bush on the name for the ticket. So that's another interesting fun fact there. All right, Mike Koss, Joe Biden to become the new Catholic president after JFK. Biden, as I talk to a lot of my Catholic friends, he seems to be more like Catholic in name only. You know, like he's Catholic when it benefits him with his party. You know, it's like he completely rejects Catholic teachings on like things like abortion, marriage, and other things like that on on those kinds of social issues. But when it comes to economic issues, he's going to proudly wave his Catholic credentials until eventually a bishop decides to not commune him. Like that almost happened to John Kerry back in 2004, if I remember right. You know, he waved his Catholicism around and saying, "My religion tells me to do good things," until, you know, you call him on the social issues. Let's see. Arthur M. Do you know Sam Aronow, an Israeli YouTuber that is covering the history of the Jewish people in a chronological series, kind of like you did? I am not familiar with that. Unless that's the series on Unpacked, I don't think I'm familiar with it. Because I know there's that series, like that channel Unpacked, that does a lot of Jewish history videos, and they've started their own, you know, history of the Jewish people series. It's very interesting. I like the production values. I think they pump out an episode every other week or something like that. So yeah. So see, kind of back to Arthur M. The chronological series, kind of like you did, but it seems that your series is discontinued. Nope. My series is not discontinued, and I guess none of my series are ever discontinued. They're always just on hiatuses, or it's just, you know, I want to wait until it's a better time. Like, say, my Jewish history videos tend to do well, relatively speaking, and so I'm sort of waiting for the last quarter of the year to push the next one out so that I can get more money from it. That's basically it. Summer is an infamously bad time for educational channels. Mike Koss, South Bend. Yes, that's where. That's where he was. That's where that mayor was from. Stephen Blythe. Hello there. You think we are going for another Great Depression? It's possible, but we're already seeing signs of recovery. So it's going to depend a lot on what happens in the next, 4 months. Yeah, in the next 4 to 6 months, it'll depend a lot on that. Like, presuming Biden wins and the Democrats take the Senate, they're going to have free reign to do whatever they want. And so that could be a big problem depending on your perspectives on that. Let's see. Mike Koss again. Hillary Clinton for Secretary of State again, or UN ambassador? I think Hillary Clinton is kind of done with active politics like that. She's more or less going to spend the rest of her career kind of like Al Gore, in that she'll complain about how she was the real winner of X election for however many years, and then eventually just fade into the distance as everyone forgets them. Yeah, so Sean 111, thank you for hosting. Question: have you heard of David Cole/Stein? He is a Holocaust historian. I'm guessing that's supposed to be Holocaust historian / revisionist. He wrote Republican Party Animal. If so, how do you feel about his documentaries? I am not familiar. David Cole sounds familiar, but I don't think I can remember any of their works at the top of my head. And it sounds like you're saying he's a Holocaust historian slash revisionist. Revisionist is what Holocaust deniers call themselves. So, yeah. If he's a Holocaust denier, if he's calling himself a Holocaust revisionist, then he's probably a Holocaust denier. See, Dr. Khan blog. Nixon was listed from New York in the 1968 election. Huh. I have to double check that. I could have sworn he was listed in California, but I could be wrong there. See, ancient accounts. Arthur M knows about every channel in the YouTuber history Slack, even though he's not in it. He's on all our comment sections. Oh, really? Oh, Reza. Hey, nice. All right, nice to see you guys. Hey, Reza. Long time no hear. Let's see. Diggs. Thoughts on all the rioting and civil unrest going on? Do you think it will get worse or worse before it gets better? My general view is that things generally get worse before they get better. And it's like President Trump has been trying to play up this new campaign strategy since, it feels like President Trump's entire strategy for the 2020 election was campaigning against Bernie so he could campaign against him being a crazy socialist. But then the crazy socialist didn't win his party's nomination. So now he has to go against the much less crazy, or maybe crazy in a different way, Biden. A crazy that doesn't make people uncomfortable Biden. And so, yeah, so now he's trying to play up the whole, this look like using footage of the riots, that this will be Joe Biden's America, even though this footage was filmed in Donald Trump's America, even though it's not quite honest to describe this as, Trump orchestrated the riots. It's like, no, that's dumb. He didn't orchestrate the riots. The riots are done in response merely to his existence. And so I don't think it'll get better. There are many ways in which it could possibly get worse, but I don't think it's going to get better. Like if Biden wins, I still think we'll see the riots. It'll just be slightly different. Like Biden might end up becoming like an LBJ figure, like where the left ends up rejecting him. But I am open to being wrong about that, and I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope things get better. I want them to get better. Let's see here. Jordanian Christian Alexander the Great was buried alive. He probably had GBS, which would explain paralysis. In ancient times, they would check breath, not pulse. Because his paralysis, his body didn't use as much oxygen. But it's interesting. When I thought about that, I always just assumed he died from poison. I'm assuming that's what most experts agree with, but it's an interesting thought. Alrighty here. Now, yes, Historia Civilis. We all aspire to be Historia Civilis. Very good. All right. Reza. All right. In your History of Shia video, the Arabic font was off in some of those names, but otherwise, really enjoyed it. Thank you. It's great to see you. Yeah, unfortunately, Photoshop and most Western, typing, text typing things, for some reason, like if you copy paste Arabic text from like Wikipedia and then paste it into something, it'll like paste it backwards or something. And I have not figured out how to reverse that, unfortunately. So that was an annoying part of that whole process. And I've been aware of it for a couple of videos, but for some reason, none of the tutorials I look at that show you how to reverse it actually end up working. So that's something I still have to figure out. Let's see. Stephen Blythe. Who is the worst president in U.S. history besides Wilson? I'm going to have to keep that secret because I've got a 5 worst presidents video coming out in October because, that's going to be the month leading up to the presidential election. And so I'm going to have multiple American presidents / politics videos geared up for that month. And I want to take advantage of all the enhanced interest. So I'm afraid I need to keep that secret for the time being. Let's see. Mike Koss. It would be a big change for USA to have an LDS president, not only Mitt Romney, but also John Huntsman. I actually don't think it would be that big of a deal. Like back in 2012, like Romney won the Republican nomination. It's like the party of evangelicals, the religious group that often don't believe or categorize Mormons as Christians, nominated a Mormon to be their candidate. At this point, I think the biggest obstacle to a Mormon becoming president isn't the Republican Party, it's the Democratic Party. They're the ones that are probably going to be the biggest obstacle for it. Let's see. All right. See, Stephen Blythe. Biden has dementia. I have no idea. I think it's a bad idea to constantly downplay his mental capacity, because all he has to do to win then is perform above expectations, and then suddenly he's the winner. Similar thing happened with Trump in the last debates. With the debates around last time. All you have to do is perform above expectations and you win. See, the Falcon General. Hey, are you a libertarian and can you join Storyfire? I would sometimes call myself a small L libertarian. I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party, and I don't think I ever would be, mostly considering they don't take themselves seriously as a party, I think. And as Storyfire, I've heard of the app, never used it, and I don't imagine myself using it, but I don't know, I could take a look at it at some point. All right, hold on a second. All right. Let's see, Reza, are you going to be supporting Biden? No, I don't see myself voting for Biden, but I'm not voting for Trump either. I mean, I live in California. California would vote for the reanimated corpse of Osama bin Laden over Donald Trump at this point. So I don't think it's not necessary. Even if you don't want Trump to be president anymore, I don't think it's necessary to vote for Biden if you live in a state like California. It's like it's going to go for Biden no matter what. Especially now that he picked Kamala Harris, because I guess he wants to turn that 30-point lead Hillary Clinton had into like a 40-point lead or something. Let's see here. Sean 111, David Cole claims the number is closer to 3.5 million rather than 6. He doesn't deny the deaths. You may want to check him out. He writes for Talkie Mag. Watch him on Donohue's show. I'll look, but that doesn't make me like the fact that he thinks the death toll was closer to 3.5 million doesn't make me feel better about the guy. Let's just say that. Oh, all right. Super chat from Reza. Thank you. Let's see. Got any questions there? Let's see. All right. Oh, okay. Oh, this is what I owed you for the pizza from 2015, I think. Oh, thank you very much, Reza. I had completely forgotten about that, if that is a thing. Alrighty here. It's like, oh, wow, a lot of people here. Okay. Okay, asking again about a Storycast, a Storyfire. Yeah, I'll check it out, but I don't see myself adding another thing. Let's see. Ancient accounts, animated history. Yep. Okay, ancient accounts again. What's happening with the history of the Middle East podcast? Well, I just recorded the audio for it yesterday, and so now I have to edit it. That's it. I'll probably be editing the audio for the next History of the Modern Middle East podcast tonight, and then it'll probably be up. It'll be live tomorrow, probably with a video version on the YouTube channel also. So, that's probably coming tomorrow or Saturday at the latest. Let's see. The Falcon General, what are your thoughts about third parties? Most third parties don't take themselves seriously as political parties, and so they don't really have a chance of winning. That's the bottom line for them. Third parties need to take themselves seriously, and although 2016 is probably the year that the libertarians have taken themselves the most seriously, they ruined a much better chance to be serious back in 2016. The Peku Alex. As the American Empire recedes, where do you think borders will be redrawn? Borders have been pretty stable since the end of World War II. You know, it's like most border changes that have occurred since the end of the Cold War, or since the end of World War II, have been with like the creation of entirely new countries, like with South Sudan, or the absorption of old countries like East Germany, South Vietnam. There are others I'm probably missing. So yeah, at this point, we're kind of just all waiting on North Korea to collapse in on itself. And then the last divided state of the Cold War will finally be gone. Mike Koss. Would it be possible for Gary Johnson to become a Democratic congressman if Biden loses? I don't think so. Like, Gary Johnson is this one-note guy nowadays. You know, like, he's very obsessed with cannabis. And that's what he was in 2016. He was the cannabis candidate. That's all he really cared about. Let's see. The Falcon General, what are your thoughts about third parties, and do you think they might be able to get federal matching funds? The issue with that is there are certain, like the Libertarian Party has refused to take federal money to run their primaries, because if you take federal money to run your primaries, you're required to engage in certain like activities. There are certain limitations on what you're allowed to do, like how you're allowed to run your primaries. You know, like if you take money for primaries, basically the state can tell you how you run them. And the Libertarian Party doesn't like that. They have a much more old-fashioned primary system, like pre-1970s kind of primary system. It's interesting, but it's also just one of those double-edged swords. You don't get as much money to run it, but you run it the way you want. See, and Rissus TF, do you think that China will become an actual threat and not just an over-exaggerated threat used by politicians, especially since they are getting even more aggressive and maybe winning the trade war? China is a country with a lot of internal sort of fragility. There's a lot of stuff in there in China that are reasons for concern for them. You know, like China has this long history of like very big economic inequality, like especially between the coastal provinces and the internal provinces. You know, the coastal provinces, which trade with the outside world, tend to grow in wealth and economic development a lot faster than the internal provinces. And so when you look at the long record that is Chinese history, it's usually some warlord either on the coastline deciding that they want to be emperor, or a warlord from an internal province wanting more for themselves that ends up bringing down China. Now, the Chinese government is well aware of this history, which is why they've been trying to, you know, like move factories into the interior in order to spread out economic development, but there's only so much that can be done there. And then, of course, China is facing a lot of international scrutiny, like what's going on with the Uyghurs. However, it's that weird thing where it's like everyone's acknowledging that it's happening, but no one's doing anything about it. It's kind of similar to like what happened to the Ukrainians in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. You know, the Holodomor, intentionally causing a famine. Most of the governments around the world knew that the Holodomor was happening, but none of them really did anything about it, because they wanted to open up relations with the Soviet Union. All right, Stephen Blythe. Should we abolish the Electoral College, and have you done a video on it, or will? I don't think we should abolish the Electoral College, though I do think it needs to be reformed, but not reformed in the way that most people want. Most people want the Electoral College reformed in a way that makes it more democratic, but I want the Electoral College reformed in a way that makes it less democratic. Considering the fact that the worst part about the modern Electoral College is that it's not democratic enough to satisfy those who want popular votes, and it's not undemocratic enough to actually function properly as a college of electors. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds right now as it's operating. All right, Ancient Accounts. CGP Grey has good videos if you want to check them out. Oh, okay, yeah. All right, yes, yeah. CGP Grey has good videos on the Electoral College, though I disagree with his final conclusion, but for various reasons. I've had an idea to make a video about it, but I ended up nixing that idea a little while ago, mostly because another video coming out in November is going to need all that extra time. All right, General Falcon, would you do a history video about Palestinians coming to El Salvador and the history of Palestinians in El Salvador? It's interesting. I don't know anything about that history. It's just seems that is a level of niche that I am not. It's a level of niche I'm not familiar with. So I'd have to take a look at it before I would consider doing a video about it. Artur M., given your interest in history of various Christian denominations, do you know about the Polish Brethren, aka Socians or Arians, basically Unitarians? Like, I've heard of them. I couldn't have told you much about them, like that they're Unitarians, but I'm familiar with the basics of Unitarian theology. But yeah, I can't say I know too much about them specifically. All right, Timur Ermolenko, shalom. Why did y'all start making videos about France's history? We started making videos about French history because in the history community, we talked about it. And we had a couple votes, and France won out the votes for, what country or region of the world we should all make videos about. And so we all decided to make videos about it, planned it out months ago, and then finally got around to picking a date and then uploading. That's how, that works. I didn't vote for France. There was a choice between like France, the Holy Roman Empire, and something else. I chose the Holy Roman Empire, but France won out, which gave me the excuse to make a video about John Calvin before I make one about Martin Luther. Reza, will you do more Islamic history videos? Yes, I will. I have at least one more video in my series that, at least in my head, I've been calling them the my Arab Caliphate series, which started with my video about the birth of Islam with the life of Muhammad and the bit before his life, then with a video about the Rashidun Caliphate, then Umayyad, then the rise and decline of the Abbasids, and then I did the Shia. So I have at least one more video in that series of videos about Islamic history, about the fall of the Abbasid Caliphate from the the Mongol conquest of Baghdad. Let's see. Mike Koss, opinion for Oregon Governor Kate Brown. Can't say much about Kate Brown herself. I know that mayor of Portland is, he's been digging his own grave by appeasing all the Antifa folks. He's given them everything they wanted, and then they still want to bury him. So yeah, that's the mayor of Portland is, just a bad guy. The Falcon General. Who do you think was more influential, Charles Darwin or Karl Marx? The funny thing for comparing the two of them is that the two of them were, they were contemporaries, and Charles Darwin's work influenced Karl Marx's later work. Like, Karl Marx originally wanted to dedicate Das Kapital to Charles Darwin, but apparently the two of them were pen pals or something because Charles Darwin told him not to do that. So it's hard to say. The two of them influenced each other because Charles Darwin gave Karl Marx the language to talk about, gave him the language, the verbiage to talk about socialism in a scientific way. That's how we get the whole idea that, Marxism is scientific socialism simply because he used Darwinist rhetoric. Let's see. Dr. Conblog again. The only way for third parties to become viable in the U.S. is to embrace proportional representation and third parties getting more visibility. That is true. The other way third parties win is by absorbing one of the larger parties. That's what usually happens. Like, that's how the Republican Party came into existence. It absorbed the remnants of the Whig Party along with two other third parties. See, Dr. Khan blog, my solution for the Electoral College, make Congress the Electoral College. At that point, you're basically just turning the United States into a parliamentary democracy. And whether or not that's a good idea just depends on what your priorities in government are. Stephen Blythe, have you done a video about the Great Depression? I have not. I want to. And my video on the Great Depression would probably focus a lot on the corruption that was involved in it, as well as how it was ineffective. But those might be better for two different videos. All right. Christian Vibrecht just tuned in, working as a census taker. Any advice for convincing white suburbanites to participate in interviews? Well, the issue with white suburbanites is that they kind of just want to be left alone. And that's the thing. You just want to be left alone. And I think we always hear about these polls that get taken, but most white suburbanites I can talk to, most fellow white suburbanites would say, it's like, well, I've never been asked to take a poll. No one's ever polled me about anything. Most of us have never actually talked to a census worker. And most people have never talked to one. Most people never actually even filled out the census. My suspicion is that they're using some kind of mathematic formula to estimate the actual populations of places, but that's just from the little information I have. So I could be entirely wrong there. So I'm afraid I don't have much advice on that. Unfortunately, I guess it just depends. White suburbanites are the swing vote of current American politics. Let's see, General Falcon, or Falcon General. What are your thoughts about ranked choice voting? I'm perfectly fine with ranked choice voting, but I think there's been like some court rulings in some places that say it's not constitutional or something like that. I don't know, some weird things. I think a couple states are experimenting with it right now. Like it's either Maine or Vermont, I think, are experimenting with it, but I would have to actually look that up to know, and I don't care enough at the moment to figure it out. Let's see. Peku Alex, for your next video on Jesus traveling around the world. I don't have a particular next video. I do have a video idea about a cult that has a heterodox understanding of Jesus, and it's a rather contemporary one, but they have a lot more material to go through than the last ones I went and looked at, so that's gonna take some more time. Let's see. Mike Koss. It is almost obvious that 2024 would be Kamala Pence, or thinking about anything else. Well, that depends on whether or not Joe Biden actually chooses to run for a second term or not. And although it's popular to think that he won't run for a second term, there hasn't been a president in a long time who could run for a second term who chose not to. Like the last time that happened was Lyndon Johnson, and that was only because he was losing his own party's primary, and so he decided to drop out of the race. So, yeah, there's that. All right. Falcon General, what are your thoughts about oversimplified and extra credits? I used to watch extra credits, and then I just kind of stopped. It's not as good history. It's entertaining. It's good for, for people who've never heard about the thing before. But I don't watch them much anymore. It's like, I think what made me stop watching them ultimately was like they did that video, I think it was last year, it's like, you didn't ask for this, but you're a Nazi now. You just wanted to play a video game, but now you're a Nazi. You didn't choose to be a Nazi by buying this World War II aesthetic video game. No, you didn't choose that. It was that ridiculousness. And oversimplified, I'm not subscribed to them. I watch a video from them every so often, but I don't know. I think I'm more just bitter at the success of oversimplified than anything else, because it's oversimplified and they're so successful. But yeah, you shouldn't. I need to not be bitter at their success. All right. Ermolenko, what are your thoughts on the French Revolution? Good or bad? There were good things about it, and a lot of bad things about it. Like the French Revolution, despite the fact that the French Revolution has become like one of the inspiration points for socialism and communism, most of the French revolutionaries were actually pretty capitalist. They just had a really hard time undoing all of that state control that the Bourbon dynasty had over the French economy prior to the revolution. It was kind of hard to undo all of that. And the fact that, France as a country is so centered around Paris, what's that old line, Paris sneezes, France catches a cold, the rest of the continent gets pneumonia or something like that. Let's see. Peku Alex, check out Antonianism, a Christian heresy in the Congo started by Kimpa Vita, where they claim Jesus was baptized in the Congo. Oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I've got some more in East Asia that I'm currently looking at, inspired by a episode of the Trash Taste podcast. If people want to go digging through that to find out what it might be. See, Mike Koss, I would bet that 2024 would be Paul Ryan or Jeff Flake versus Kamala or Cuomo. That 2024 race would depend, entirely on what happens this year, what happens in November. I think it's still likely that Biden might run in 2024 because, people don't turn down opportunities for power. At least most Christians don't, or not Christians, most politicians don't. The Falcon General, thoughts about BLM? It depends on what you mean by BLM. If you're talking about the generalized goal of Black Lives Matter, which is, end racial profiling and, like militarization of police and wrongful imprisonment, then yeah, I'm fully only on board with that. But then, of course, there's BLM, the official organization, which is quite problematic when you look at a lot of their stuff, and they've been saying the same thing since 2014 when the movement started. So I guess it's the idea of separating movement from organization, and then there's just all the problem of all the BLM organizations that popped up after the George Floyd killing, which reminds me a lot of like what happened with the Tea Party, where you had a lot of grifters coming in. A lot of these grifters, they would found some sort of 501c organization with Tea Party in the name, and then call up seniors and asking them, we're trying to stop the Obama administration from doing X, and we need your help. We need you to send money to us. And in exchange, we'll send you this special pocket constitution or something or whatever in exchange for your money that we will use to help stop the Obama administration from doing something. And a lot of stuff popped up like that. And I suspect that a lot of the BLM organizations and agencies and groups that started up right around, that we saw suddenly appear right around the George Floyd thing, I'm suspecting a lot of them are kind of like that. It's like suddenly there was money to be made from the Black Lives Matter movement, and so suddenly a bunch of people just showed up out of nowhere, claiming that, we'll get protesters, we'll use this money to help get protesters out of jail. How, we don't know, but we'll do something. See, Jordanian Christian, why did the Mongol Empire collapse even though they had access to people who were skilled in governance, from Persians and Arabs to Chinese and Europeans? The Mongol Empire collapsed because it wasn't really a single empire. It broke up along lines of different generals. That was the whole thing. You had different personalities claiming control of different parts of the empire. And that's how it was. And the parts of the empire that happened to break off also just happened to fall in line with previously existing political entities. Like there was one of the Khanates that broke off from the greater Mongol Empire just happened to coincide with, the old Persian empires. Some just happened to coincide with the old Huns and different groups. One just happened to coincide with China, That's why the Mongol Empire fell. It broke along previously existing political lines, with generals taking advantage of it. See, Dr. Khan blog, I recall Jacobins were more state interventionist. Yes and no. Like a lot of surprising amount of like capitalist thought actually came out of the French Revolution. It just so happens that they weren't the ones in charge. That's kind of the thing. Let's see. Falcon General, what are your thoughts about Jesse Ventura? Do you think he would run in 24? No, I don't think Jesse Ventura is. Jesse Ventura is just Jesse Ventura. He's just a weirdo. He's just going to be around, but he's probably not going to be around much longer. Just out of sheer age. Let's see. Natalie Smith, what's problematic about the organization? I'm assuming you're talking about the BLM, and it's that there is, let's see here. Yeah, they have some officially listed goals, which people have found as kind of revealing. Let's see. See, they may have actually changed their websites recently, but I know until the George Floyd incident, there was a lot more iffy stuff. But basically, a lot of it was boilerplate Marxist stuff combined with, the kind of what's that one book that came out recently? In Defense of Rioting or Defense of Looters, something. A lot of stuff that was eerily similar to that. But maybe they've reformed themselves in the last few months. I don't know. I just know that it's not the only BLM organization that's around now, and some of them are probably grifters just by the sheer law of numbers, like what happened with the Tea Party. Let's see. Mike Koss, possibility of Hawaiian presidency? Unless you want to count Barack Obama. Obama was born in Hawaii, as most experts will agree. See, Falcon General, what are your thoughts about the book Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee? I have not read it. The cynical historian has probably read it, but I have not. Let's see. Christian Vibrecht, any theories to why there never have been a serious effort to abolish Medicare? Well, it's because Medicare is popular with the right group of people. It's like, here's the thing. Like, the Affordable Care Act didn't benefit everyone. Like, I'm one of the many people who, when the Affordable Care Act went into place, lost their insurance. That's just the bottom line. I lost my insurance. I had to go on to the public plan, and the public plan sucks. But there's some people who wouldn't have anything without it. And those are the people who it's beneficial to put in ads. It's like, oh, this person had a pre-existing condition. They couldn't get any care. Well, now they could. Even if a bunch of other people couldn't get care anymore because these policies were put in place. Not, it's like they couldn't get care not because they had pre-existing conditions, but now they couldn't afford their plan. But, that's just one of the things. And so that's one of the reasons Medicare is so hard to abolish, is because there's just enough people who benefit from it for it to be politically viable, if not economically viable in the long term. Plus, Medicaid and Medicare are also kind of like subsidies to the healthcare industry. So, there's that also. What are your thoughts about Vermin Supreme and the Libertarian left? The Libertarian left, I find to be an oxymoron. You can't really have communism without some kind of top-down authority enforcing it. And once you create some kind of top-down authority to enforce it, you've created a state. So, that's why anarchists have never made sense to me. Especially anarcho-communists. Like, we're going to establish communal living. It's like, what's that line from Bender in that episode of Futurama? We will teach them of our peaceful ways by force. It's like, Mike Koss, sorry for asking so many questions. Well, that's what this Q&A is for. Wanted an important opinion. Born in an Orthodox country, I am Catholic for 5 years, but I am in doubt again and am searching LDS. Well, theologically, I can't endorse the LDS. I'm a Lutheran, so I can't really endorse Mormonism, but it depends on what you're looking for. Because most people who convert to like Mormonism or the Latter-day Saint movement don't usually do so because of like the theology. They're usually doing it for like the communal aspects of the religion. It's like they like the people they meet at their churches or temples. That's the reason why like most LDS growth comes from long-term LDS families having lots of kids. It's similar to like Scientology in that most of the growth comes from the families that have been there for a couple generations. Because what happens with a lot of these, Mormon missionaries, is that they'll go to these foreign countries, they'll convert people, but within 10 years, most of those converts revert back to their old religion. That's something you don't really hear too much about is the is the apostasy rate among Mormon converts, which is pretty high, especially outside the United States. Because as it turns out, Mormon social norms don't make sense outside of the United States. So, Dr. Khan blog, many political commentators talk about the erosion of civility and norms, but I get the feeling that much that is a construct of the mid-20th century. Depends on what you mean by a construct. Just because something's a construct doesn't mean it's not real. I mean, fact of the matter is, much of the lack of civility comes from like some political opportunism, because like you need to win this election. The easiest way to get this win election, of course, is to bring a bunch of people out to vote. And the easiest way to get people to come out to vote is to make them angry or fearful. It's like, and both the left and the right have done this for a long time. Like back in 2008 and 2012, the Democrats got people to come out and vote saying, well, you need to vote for Barack Obama or otherwise we get 4 more years of Bush. Or in 2012, it's like, you need to vote for Barack Obama. Otherwise, we'll go back to being like we were under Bush. That's fear-mongering. That's what it is. And both sides have done it. Trump was doing it back in 2016, 2018. It's like, if you vote for Hillary, you get 4 to 8 more years of Obama. And depending on who you're talking to, that was either a good or bad thing. Let's see. Oh, well, that's a lot of M's and K's in that name. I'm just going to call you Makolo. Have any book you would recommend to anyone? A must read? Yes. At the moment, I would recommend Red Famine by Anne Applebaum. I'm in the middle of reading this. It may or may not end up being used in a video. Red Famine is about the Holodomor. And so that's all I'm going to say about that, for fear of spoiling too much. All right, Garrett Allen. To this very day, France still does not allow the publication of information regarding race, ethnicity, religion on French overseas territories. That's interesting. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have the data, but don't want to do anything with it. I have no idea. That's a problem for French people to figure out. See, Unrissus TF. Do you think that the impeachment of Andrew Johnson was a ghost hunt like Trump feel to it? It was a ghost hunt like Trump feel to it. He was a dick, but weren't the articles of impeachment really vague and they just wanted him out of office? Yes, that is true. They were somewhat vague, and basically they got him for violating a law that the Supreme Court later found to be unconstitutional. That's the big thing there. So, yeah, but then again, impeachment doesn't have any specific guidelines to it. it's like the Constitution says, gives a couple things, like for treason or other like bad behavior, but they don't define what bad behavior is. And so the only thing they really prescribe is the mechanics of impeachment. And with that in mind, basically impeachment is in its entirety political. It's rarely based on anything like important principle. It is political in its entirety, basically. And so a president can be impeached for whatever Congress thinks is appropriate to impeach him for. That might not be a good idea, but it's still the way things are. Let's see. Mike Koss, all info I have is from personal search. In Greece, there are 378 LDS members, almost 10 millions. Yeah, so I don't imagine there are too many Mormons in Greece, but who knows? They could be living in secret. They have their missionaries around the world. Oh, all right. And hey, super chat from Zane Rossler. What type of reception have you received for your history of Islam? How do you feel about it? Well, I've received different kinds of reception from different groups of people. I would say the groups I've gotten the most negative reception from, of course, are some Sunni Muslims, and depending on the video, well, okay, most of the videos I get the same kind of complaint from Sunni Muslims, and that is, this thing it's filled with biased Shia sources or whatever. And in the most recent Muslim history video that was all about Shia Islam, they were getting angry at, some of them were getting angry that I even called Shia Muslims. It's the group of Muslims who don't see Shia as actual Islam. And so the group that don't remind the ones that think Shia isn't actual Islam remind me of certain like sets of Protestants that don't think like even Catholics are Christians. It's like there are Protestants that call Catholics non-Christians, and so that's kind of a crazy thing to me as a Lutheran. That seems kind of crazy, but there are crazy people in all these groups. They're all fighting for the purity of their cause. They're pure, or what they see as the purity of their group or movement. And so, yeah. So the reception has been largely positive, with a few flaring, angry Sunnis, basically. Plus, I think my video about the history of early Shia is kind of like one of the only ones on YouTube, or at least the only ones that covers it the way I did. So, it's nice that it exists. Falcon General, what are your thoughts about ContraPoints and your thoughts about atheism? ContraPoints is a good writer and a good producer of content. I don't agree with anything they have. I don't agree with anything that Natalie Wynn has to say. But as someone who makes videos and watches a lot of YouTube, I can at least appreciate the production quality. I can appreciate how hard it is to make good looking work, Like it's the same, my same feelings. I have the same feelings towards a lot of bread tubers that do the same kind of stuff, be it Philosophy Tube, H Bomber Guy, or all the others. Just most of them tend to be super artsy, even if I disagree with everything they say, but I can at least respect the work that went into it. And atheism, it's, when I was younger, I cared more. Now I just think like atheists are just kind of sad, So, but yeah, atheism. I'm not an atheist. Obviously, I've mentioned before in videos and past live streams, I'm a Lutheran, and I've well gotten past the atheism versus Christianity debates of the late 2000s, so they don't really concern me too much anymore. Okay, let's see. Archer M. Okay, I have to go. Bye. Okay, well, bye, Archer M. Hope that wasn't too long ago. Jordanian Christian. Why was Buddhism so popular in places like China, Japan, Vietnam, and Korea, etc., but gradually died out in its birthplace, India? Well, it's because in India has Hinduism. That's really it. I mean, like Buddhism kind of is to India what like Christianity is to the Middle East. Like I mean, the Middle East, especially the land of Israel, is the home place of Christianity, and yet Christianity is a minority religion within its own homeland. Well, similar to Buddhism. Buddhism spread across East Asia through missionaries, and all the same happened with Christianity in Europe. And so it's just one of those things where the local power reasserted itself or was asserted over by someone else in the case of Christianity. All right. All right. Dr. Khan blog. I think fear mongering is a common theme in U.S. elections. I can't think of an election that didn't include some of it. Yeah. It's fear is a much easier motive than hope or rational policy discussion. You know what I mean? Like talking about, marginal tax rates doesn't really get the blood flowing unless you portray it as, like he's giving money to the wealthy or something like that. Let's see. Mike Koss, could Israel ever become a total theocracy, positively or opposite? I don't see modern Israel becoming a theocracy because much of modern Israel is rather secular. Most of the Jews in Israel are secular Jews. It's like the place in the world with the highest percentage of like religiously observant Jews is like, it might even be the United States. It's either the United States or like somewhere in Eastern Europe. But yeah, most ethnic Jews in Israel are rather secular. So I don't see them becoming a theocracy. All right, Falcon General, what are your thoughts about Gavin Newsom appointing somebody to take Kamala Harris to see if she becomes vice president? Do you think there should be a special election? The U.S. Constitution grants state governors the right to appoint new senators if a position becomes open. So if Gavin wants to appoint someone who can, but whether or not he can is going to be dependent upon like after that point is dependent upon the individual state laws. Because like some states have mandated that if a Senate seat opens up, it requires a special election, but others do not. I do not currently know what California's laws about that are, so I can't say. As much as I would like it there to be an open election, it's going to have an open election would have the same results as Gavin Newsom appointing someone. That is, it'll be a Democrat either way. So do we have a special election that wastes public money, or just have Gavin Newsom appoint somebody until that senatorial term runs up? I would rather just not waste the money because it's going to be the same result either way. Let's see. A Jordanian Christian seems to have, I think I answered that question. Why was Buddhism so popular in Japan, China? Or I guess I just explained that it happened. I can't explain exactly why it was popular. I think it's because Buddhism as a religion doesn't really replace local religions. Like in pre-communist China, most people in China practice multiple religions at once, like Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And so Buddhism is something that, at least for East Asian religions, it doesn't replace any currently existing religions. It's something that you can add on top of what you're already doing. All right. Samuel Amrachter, Nicki Minaj or Cardi B? No preference. I don't really listen to either of them. I have seen WAP, and it's a thing. I prefer Remy's parody of it. See, the General Falcon General, do you think we should keep the United States government secular? Well, it depends on what you mean by secular. Not every because there's a lot of people out there who for some reason think any like any expressed approval for religion by public figures or by public institution equates to a violation of separation of church and state, which is not really true. That's never been. Like I had a video last year where I reviewed that Netflix documentary series called The Family. And yeah, they're asserting some similar concerns, and I find the whole thing is mostly fear-mongering. But we're already pretty secular, but with a religiously secular or something like that. Words and such. Ermolenko, modern Israelites have lots of their laws derived from religion, so they can be called partial theocracy. Well, you could say the same thing for most of the Western world. You know, like, well, yeah. Lots of modern law is based on, you know, biblical law. And so if you want to call Israel a partial theocracy, you could say the same thing about most European countries and the United States as well. Peku Alex, what do you think of the claim that the U.S. has a civil religion? I would say it's true. You know, it's a collection of traditions and norms. Some of them take place in the realm of the sacred, some in the more secular. You know, yeah, I'd say we have a civil religion. It's an appreciation of the past, freedom, America, all that kind of stuff. See, Felix Vauchage. Catholics were accused of paganism by Calvinists. That is true. They also got accused of paganism by a bunch of other Protestant sects. The only ones that didn't accuse the Calvinists of paganism were like the Lutherans. No, we just accused them of heresy. See, Dr. Khan blog. Will you ever make a video about America's place in Protestantism? It seems like much of Protestant denominations come from the U.S. Yes and no. Much of American Protestantism is basically just Calvinism. And so making a video about Protestantism in America or the role of America in Protestantism would mostly just be the role of Calvinism in America, basically. Whereas when I made a video about, you know, Lutherans in America, that was something a little more personal to me and also something that most people probably don't have some kind of vague familiarity with. Mike Koss, could Justin Bieber run for office? Seriously? Probably not. I'm not even sure if Justin Bieber is even an American citizen. I know he's from Canada, I think. So I don't know if he's even a citizen or not. Though I think actually, I don't know if he's even at least 25 yet. I had to double check all that. Let's see. Let's see. The Falcon General. What are your thoughts about Bolivia's coup? Was there one recently? I haven't paid attention. Alex Winter. Can you do the stanky leg? I cannot. I am not a young black girl, or I am a very white person. I cannot dance like that. See. Steve D, do you believe race issues today in America are comparable to the 1960s and 70s? No, things are much better today than they were back then. There's definitely political incentive to make them appear as bad as they are back then, but they are not, in fact, as bad as back then. That is, yeah, like the people arguing that we have not made any progress on race relations in the last 40 to 50 years they're doing it for politics. It's easier to get people riled up, especially woke white leftists, to rile them up by saying things haven't gotten any better since Martin Luther King. It's like, no, they've gotten way better. It's like you'd have to be blind to think that. Let's see. And Rissus TF, do you believe in a shadow government in the slightest, like unelected officials sitting at the table? People usually talk about lobbyists, but I'm talking about actual decisions making people, not influence. Not really, no. It's like when people have talked about the whole like the deep state concept, there's two variations on the deep state concept. You know, there's the kind that the CIA developed when talking about countries like Turkey or Pakistan back during the Cold War, which is basically, you know, there's this cabal of people within the government who will overthrow the government whenever it goes out of lines with what it wants. And then there's the more benign concept of deep state, which is more like a Byzantine bureaucracy of unelected bureaucrats who serve for life. And so they have their own interests, and so they can slow down the process of different decisions. I'm far more sympathetic to the latter than the former. Let's see. See, Dr. Khan blog. There was a coup not long ago that overthrew the Chavez inspired socialist leader who wanted to extend his term. Okay, yes, now that is ringing a bell. I think I saw something about that somewhere. Yeah, not too much thoughts about it at the moment. I'd have to do a little more research into it. Let's see. General Falcon, what are your thoughts about Howie Hawkins and the Green Party in general? Don't know who Howie Hawkins is. And the Green Party is basically where all of the crazies from the Democratic Party go when they think the Democratic Party isn't supporting Bernie enough. Okay, Alex Winter, I will not do the stanky leg. I don't know what you made Mr. Beat do, but I will not be performing the stanky leg. All right, that Cat's fan 22. Why aren't there more political parties in the US? Maybe I'm not aware being Canadian, but it almost seems to me as though you have a two-party system. Well, congratulations, you've noticed the same thing that most political observers have noticed for a long time. So, yeah, the US is sort of a de facto two-party system, not a de jure two-party system. The way the system works is that, you know, it only allows for two major parties to actually be successful. Now, there are more than two political parties. It's just most of them are what we call third parties, you know. Like you have the first party, which controls the presidency, the second party, which is the opposition to the presidency, and then all the other parties that don't have any seats in Congress are all third parties. And so we have a bunch of third parties, but none of them perform very well. And so we functionally have a two-party system. And there are benefits and detriments to a two-party system. You know, like a two-party system has a tendency to result in more moderate policies and moderate politicians. That has been undermined in recent years, but you know, that's still you get more moderates when you have a two-party system than not. But once again, any system can be overrun with enough determination. Okay, let's see. Alex Winter, I'm honestly surprised you even know what it is. I know when I hear someone say do the stanky leg, I know it's a dance. I couldn't tell you what the dance looks like. I haven't looked it up because I don't dance. So yeah, Falcon General, I recommend you watch Bad and Panada's video about the history of the opposition party in Venezuela. They talk about the coup that happened there with Chavez. Yeah, okay. I might take a look at it later. Ermolenko, there is no need in chaos in multiple parties. There is no need in chaos and multiple parties. Look at Ukraine. No one even understands what is right, left, etc. Ukraine is Ukraine. That is all I have to say about Ukraine. All right, here. Go check something out real quick. Alrighty. All right, Alex Winter. Serious question. What do you think would have been different in America, in American history, if Wendell Willkie won the 1940 election instead of FDR? The United States still would have gone to war. Or that would have happened. America would have still gone to war with Japan and in 1941 because Japan was still in a bind. They needed to get access to oil, and all the oil was held up in, American and British and French overseas territories. And so they would still have to have declared war. And after the Atlantic Compact signed in 1940 between the United States and Great Britain, they essentially made their own kind of, defense pact where if one of them got attacked again, they would, both go to war. And so the United States was on a war footing prior to 1941. So I don't think too much would have changed. Is there a big war in the Middle East up in the next decade? That is hard to tell. It's going to depend on how things continue to play between like all the Arab Gulf monarchies. It looks like they're slowly opening up relations with Israel. Like the UAE not too long ago opened up their relations with Israel, and now they can openly trade. And I'm not 100% certain, not to double check if they like actually officially recognized Israel or they simply have normalized or semi-normalized relations with them. And so that's going to depend a lot on that, I think. Let's see, Dr. Khan blog. Badam Panda is a bread tuber who complained that knowing better, despite wanting to remove Columbus Day, was shilling for him. Ah. Yeah, Knowing Better made a second video about Christopher Columbus in which he said all the bad things. So, like that was his Christopher Columbus in context video. I think that was a collaboration with Cogito. So, yeah. The Knowing Better has a weird place within the bread tube communities. Like a lot of them embrace him, but he doesn't go as far to the left as many of them would like. They basically they like Knowing Better when he's trashing the right. That's when they like him. Similar to how some lefties like my video about the history of Holocaust denial. They like that I was exposing them, even though I also talk about how there were left-wing Holocaust deniers. Let's see. Alex Winter, is Thomas Dewey the saddest politician in recent U.S. history? Yeah, well, it's only as sad because they had all those newspapers printed. And so the sadness that was his candidacy was mostly due to, a lack of communication technologies. Let's see. Right. All right. Hello there, Eduardo. Again, Eduardo Rodriguez Majorano. Knowing Better is not that political shill that pretends to be educational. A lot of the political channels pretend to be educational, well, it's a big issue with a lot of the bread tubers is that they walk along this borderline between being educational and political. It's like the difference between, like, say, right-wing YouTube is that none of the right-wing YouTubers ever pretend to be educational. But then again, most of the right-wing YouTubers don't. Like, most of them are just, commentators. Most of them just comment on current politics. while the bread tubers are making big video essays about why you shouldn't use the word trap. So yeah. All right, Timur, do you like Iran or Saudi Arabia more? I like neither of them. I do not have a dog in that fight. Saudi Arabia has terrible human rights records, and so does Iran. They're both awful. It's like asking, do you like Iran or Saudi Arabia more? Is like asking, do I like Stalin or Hitler more? It's like, can I just hate both of them? Can I be allowed that? Let's see. Voshage. Saudis are playing on alliance with Israel against Iran. That is true. Although now the Saudis are playing this weird thing where it's like they're trying to cozy up more with Israel. They're trying to become more friendly, but they can't become too openly friendly with them. Otherwise, their own people would, revolt and overthrow the government probably. Since the Saudi government for decades has had anti-Israeli propaganda in their school systems and their educational systems, lots of that anti-Israeli propaganda. And so they're going to have a hard time undoing decades of their own work. Let's see. Alex Winter, I guarantee you the two reasons why he lost was because he wasn't that interesting a candidate and he had a mustache. Well, I'd like to say it wasn't because of the mustache, but yeah, mustaches were out of fashion by that time. Let's see, Dr. Khan blog. That reminds me. Heard of Big Joel? He's a BreadTube-esque reviewer of that trash on Christian entertainment. Yeah, I'm familiar with Big Joel. I don't watch most of his stuff, but I see it recommended. Big Joel and a bunch of other BreadTubers pop up in my feed on the rare occasion when I watch a Lindsay Ellis video or something. They pop up every so often. Either that or the rare occasion you watch a Quentin Reviews video. It's like, oh, you watched a video from this person. Let me show you all these other people related to them for the next month. It's like, yeah, great. I don't need you to recommend me Thoughtsline talking about why stealing is okay again. Let's see, Alex Winter. Who's the worst Speaker of the House in the U.S. history? No idea. I haven't researched enough speakers of the House. And unfortunately, we just don't write as much about them. American political history is very much centered around the president, unfortunately. And so we don't really have too much, history of Congress kind of stuff. We do need some of that, but I'm not going to be the one to do the research, at least not right now. Let's see. Hold on a second. I need to adjust the light sources in my office. All right, a little adjustment there. Okay. Oh, you know what? One more time. All right, that's as much as I can adjust, and I think I made it worse. Okay, then. Cool. All right, a bunch of questions here. All right, and Rissus TF, Ron Paul versus Gingrich versus Santorum versus Romney. Who would have been your first pick? See, what you're showing me there, Enrissus, is the 2012 lineup of candidates, and Ron Paul was my first choice back at that time. And honestly, it would have been, if I were to make that same choice today, it would have been between Ron Paul and Mitt Romney, surprisingly enough. So if I had to rank them, it would probably go Ron Paul, Romney, Santorum, Gingrich. Dr. Comblog, speaking of Clinton reviews, your History Channel video was miles better. His vid was just complaining about ancient aliens and saying Jefferson was a rapist. Yeah. My History Channel video came out a month before his, and then his came out, and then put like it basically, as annoying as his video is, it boosted my video's performance quite a bit. So I can't be too angry. It's like his History Channel video is the reason why my History Channel video has become, I think at this point, it might just be my most viewed video. And it's the one earning my channel a lot of the money these days. So, I'm thankful that it exists, but it contributed nothing new to the conversation. What do you think of Doug Ducey? I don't know if I know Doug Ducey. The name sounds familiar, but I can't name anything at the top of my head. Sorry, one more time. This light is really bothering me. There we go. Now it's actually fixed. Now the light is actually fixed. Yeah, so I don't know anything about Doug Ducey at the top of my head. The name sounds familiar, but I can't say anything about it. See ya. All right. Madrano, what do you know about Jewish genetics? A few days ago, I realized that I might be part Sephardic Jew because my grandma was a Spanish refugee from the Civil War. Well, I have a video about Jewish genetics, or at least I have a video about sort of, the genetic origins of Jews and why certain myths about Jewish origins are false. That's the second episode in my History of the Jewish People series. You can find that in my Jewish history playlist. See, and your Sephardic Jewish founded a lot of towns in northern Mexico. Yeah, there are a lot of the quote-unquote crypto Jews. Those were in the New World because the discovery of the New World happened not too long after the Reconquista. And so Jews needed a place to go. Let's see. Matt B, much better lighting? Yes, thank you. Yeah, unfortunately the sun's going down and I've got blinds. Let's see. It might be that most of us have more Jewish ancestry than we think. It's possible, but there needs to be more, of course, more research done to confirm anything. Yeah. Okay, so Alex Winter, he's the governor of Arizona. He looks like the real life equivalent of the idiot cartoon dad character type, and he used to be CEO of Cold Stone Ice Cream. Okay, is that Ducey, I'm assuming? Okay, now people in the comments are arguing about Jewish genetics. Oh boy. That's what I made the video about. Your Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Jews have more genetically in common with each other than anyone else in the world. That is the fact of the matter. Speaking of ancestry, are those DNA kits that tell you your ancestry actually legit? Most of them seem to be. It just depends on where you get them from. Like 23andMe and Ancestry seem to be the most reliable ones. My family has used the kits from Ancestry because those samples you give end up going to a research university, so they have more data to use for that kind of stuff. So if you're going to use them, I would suggest go with Ancestry because they get more genetic research out of it than just your ancestry. What if Jeb Bush was president? Well, first, Jeb Bush would have to have won the Republican Party nomination in 2016. And if he did, I definitely think he would have lost. America was still not too keen on the Bushes in 2016. See, Dr. Khan blog. Do you think that American exceptionalism and Americans' understanding of political change is why it's so hard to make structural political change? I don't think American exceptionalism is the cause for this, because we've made major political changes in the past, with American exceptionalism being a concept then. Like back in the early 20th century, we changed the electoral system to have, the popular election of senators. We changed, like basically during the when Woodrow Wilson was president, we had democratic election of senators. We instituted the first federal income tax that was actually constitutional. We gave women the right to vote. We banned alcohol. I mean, those are some pretty major changes, most of them to the political system. So it's not that Americans are incapable of making changes to the political system. It's just that there has to be a big enough reasoning. Just the fact of the matter is, like the Electoral College is not a big enough problem for people to dedicate all of their energies to. Let's see. That Cats Fan 22, you should try it and show us the result on YouTube. I would be willing to do that if they sponsored a video. But otherwise, like both my mom and dad have taken the tests. And so if I want to know mine, I can just, do the math, just take half of each of their numbers and then add them together. Alex Winter. Oh, you're asking what would happen if Jeb had become president, had won everything despite everything that was in his way. I mean, he wouldn't have the same controversies as President Trump. They would mostly I think it would look a lot like, when the first Bush was president. They'd be calling it, a lot of the same problems you had there, I think. Let's see. Ermolenko, the why 99% of East European Jews look nothing like people from Arabic dunes. It's because European Jews have intermarried with Europeans. That doesn't make them not Jewish. That's why. Plus, the Jews that remained in the Middle East, the Mizrahi, also look almost indistinguishable from Arabs, depending on where you're looking. Let's see, Dr. Khan blog. For many Americans, a Clinton is better than a Bush. I don't know. We've only elected one Clinton, but we've elected two Bushes. I think they, yeah. So, yeah. All right, then. Jordanian Christian, most Jews aren't pure Jewish. It depends on what you're meaning by Jewish, ethnically or religiously. Ethnically, it doesn't really matter. Ethnicity is a matter of culture. This idea that ethnicity is determined by bloodlines is it's an old racial thing from the 18th and 19th century. All right, here. Right about the hour and a half mark. I think I'll be on here for about another 20, 30 minutes. So, all right, what else do we got? All right, if you have not taken the audience survey, the 2020 Casual Historian audience survey, I would recommend you do. Link down in the description below. All right, Alex Winter, have you watched the Saw films? If so, how scary were they to you? I am not a horror movie guy. I do not watch horror movies of my own volition. I can probably count the number of horror movies I've watched on like one hand, and in every situation it was because I was with a bunch of other people who wanted to watch a horror movie. In one instance where I was in a class where like every Saturday morning we went to the theater and watched a movie, and one of the weeks they had like one of the Paranormal Activities or something. Let's see. Mike Koss asks, John Hickenlooper, a Quaker for president? I don't know who John Hickenlooper is. Hickenlooper sounds like a name I've heard before, but it might also just be a quirky name. And Quakers, I need to do a little more research. I used to know more about the Quakers than I do now. And I might be confusing them with Shakers in my head. But yeah, I think, I if I remember correctly, Benjamin Franklin and Richard Nixon were both Quakers. So nothing inherently against Quakers. They were some of the earliest abolitionists. Let's see. Alex Winter, I asked because I haven't watched them that much. Yeah, I'm terrified of them. Yeah, it's like I've never watched the Saw movies. I had a poster for Saw 3 once, but that was because I took a film class back in community college. And one of the days at the theater, they were giving away a bunch of old posters, and they were all rolled up into tubes, and we had no idea what we're getting. So I picked one up, and it happened to be Saw. Used it as wrapping paper. Let's see. Timur Emerlenko. Timur, we'd like to see the numbers and figures in your census. Well, I don't know if I call it a census. I use the word survey specifically because I'm trying to get like opinion stuff. I have some demographic information in there that I collect, but it's not strictly a census, but it's usable stuff. I plan to do a live stream about my audience survey later this year, probably after the election. So, we'll see then. Let's see. Mike Koss was governor of Colorado and now candidate for Senate. Oh, if that's Hickenlooper, okay, that still doesn't change the fact that I don't know who Hickenlooper is. See, Alex Winter, what if Mitch McConnell was president? The fact that Mitch McConnell has no aspirations to become president is probably one of the most admirable things about him. It's like there are so many politicians nowadays see the Senate not as a place to do actual political work, but rather as a stepping stone to the White House. And so the fact that Mitch McConnell is like an institutionalist who wants to keep the Senate operating in some kind of normalcy is the greatest thing about Mitch McConnell, or what's the joke they all call him, Cocaine Mitch. That's the jokey thing they started calling him a few years back. So yeah. Let's see. And Rissa's TF, one of your tweets long ago talked about Nixon's hate for hippies. Is that the petty reason why he started the pre-war on marijuana? It's one of them, yeah. So, okay, so a number of years ago, a quote from somebody who worked with the Nixon White House came out that claimed that the entirety of the drug war was because Nixon was racist and wanted to arrest black people. There's a few problems, however, with the sourcing of this quote. The quote, for one, it came from one of the guys that got arrested in the Watergate scandal, whom Nixon ended up not pardoning, Nixon and Ford ended up not pardoning. And so he was a guy who would have had a grudge against President Nixon. On top of this quote was allegedly given to a radio. So it was given to a radio interviewer. Just some guy in radio. He allegedly gave this quote to a radio guy back in the 1990s and didn't reveal this quote until like 2016. So he interviewed a guy back in like 94 when Nixon died and supposedly gave this quote. So, guy who was part of the Watergate break-ins isn't pardoned by Ford or Nixon, and so goes to jail. So he's angry at Nixon. Then he supposedly gives a quote to a radio guy in the 1990s. He dies in like the early 2000s. And then in 2016, this radio guy reveals that he had this quote from this Nixon guy for like 20 years. It's like, why did you wait till then to reveal it? It's so the sourcing of this quote that claims Nixon started the drug war for his reasons of his racism is rather suspect. And so it also, and like I said, the whole thing about Nixon hating hippies, Nixon really hated hippies. And his Quaker upbringing caused him to really hate, alcohol, drugs, and all that counterculture type stuff. And so when Nixon started the drug war, he didn't need any kind of racism to motivate his wanting to wage the drug war. He had plenty of that from his Quaker upbringing, hating all the counterculture type stuff that the hippies were pushing. So he hated drugs. He wasn't a big fan of alcohol. He was just the right guy at the right time to start a drug war. And by right, I mean, well, the drug war wasn't right. It had bad results in the long run. But, people who think the drug war was started purely over, racist reasons from Nixon don't know how much he hated hippies. Okay. Mike Koss, what if Ted Cruz would become the POTUS? Ted Cruz, I think, definitely would have done a better job than Trump. Much better job. He would have far fewer gaffes than President Trump has, because Trump has no filter. Plus, it would have been just sort of a just punishment for Trump to lose the presidency to Cruz, especially after accusing Ted Cruz's dad of being involved in the Kennedy assassination. And so Ted Cruz would be in a much better position. It's like Ted Cruz, for people who don't know, it's like as early as February of 2016, Ted Cruz basically had his entire list of cabinet and federal appointees already chosen by February of 2016. And towards the beginning of the primaries, he was ready to become president. Trump didn't have a list ready by the time he took the oath of office, which has led many to believe that he didn't actually plan on winning. See, Christian Vibrecht, welcome back. Just turned back in. Any theories to why Trump has deported less illegal immigrants than Obama? Part of the reason, of course, is simply that he's been in office for not as long. Also, the fact that his administration has been under far more scrutiny than the Obama administration was. I mean, after all, those pictures that first came out when, it was revealed children are being held in cages at the border. Those pictures were from the Obama administration, and the media didn't report on it then. So one of the reasons he hasn't is simply because he's been under far more scrutiny. If that is the case, I don't know. He may have deported more, but I would be surprised if he has with all the scrutiny. Plus, there's all of the litigators that are out right now because of the messed up way our political system is now, where most actions of the federal government are done by executive fiat. And so the president says, all right, I'm going to have an executive order or something to make X happen. And then a bunch of lawyers come in and stop the thing from happening. Let's see. Let's see. Alex Winter, Ted Cruz is an awful amalgamation of Paul Ryan and Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz is an amalgamation of himself. I mean, I guess technically. Vibrecht, Rubio was a fool for not dropping out, then pledging support for Cruz. I would agree. Cruz is one of the people who should have dropped out a lot earlier in the race. Cruz and Kasich, I would say, are the biggest reasons why Trump ended up winning the Republican nomination. See, Mike Koss, despite I love Hillary, I confess Carly Fiorina was a good choice. I don't know enough about Carly Fiorina to say one way or the other. I just know one of my favorite commentators, Sarah Isker, was her campaign manager. So, there's I have things to learn about her. All right. Dr. Khan blog. I highly doubt Cruz would have been better. The left would be less apoplectic, but would still have scorn for Cruz like every GOP president since Nixon. Oh no, I agree. Yes, they would still have scorn simply because how dare you replace Obama with him? But Cruz would still have that. He would have that. He would be able to claim that whole, the first Latino president was a Republican thing, and that's something Republicans would definitely hang on to for dear life. Basically, Cruz would lack all of the uniquely Trump problems, as in Trump has caused a lot of his own problems by just opening his mouth. Cruz would have a lot less of that, and so things would be a lot less toxic right now, I think. But it's not that they wouldn't be toxic. There would still be toxicity, but they wouldn't be as toxic, I think, with Cruz. Oh, that Alex Winter. You meant Marco Rubio. An awful amalgamation of Paul Ryan and Marco Rubio. I don't know. I've softened on Marco Rubio over the last few years. I wasn't a big fan of him back in 2016. All right. We're nearing the 2-hour mark, so I think in the next 10 minutes we'll be shutting down for the evening. But, any more questions, go ahead and send them in. Let's see. All right, got about a few new responses to the survey. So once again, take the audience survey if you haven't at some point after this or right now or whenever. Let's see. Alex Winter, who's the worst Republican in office at the moment? I'm trying to think. I think is Steve King already out of office, or I'm trying to remember because I know he was. I think Steve King lost his primary. That's what happened. Yeah, so Steve King is one of the worst. Yeah, Trump's biggest problem isn't any ideology. Trump's biggest problem, of course, is just he's a narcissist. Oh, I got a super chat from Eduardo. Just because I love your streams. Well, thank you very much, Eduardo. Love having you here. See, Eduardo Medrano, Nikki Haley for president. I'd be supportive of that. Nikki Haley is like this amazing figure who's like the only person to serve in the Trump presidency and come out clean on the other side. It's like everyone else who's worked for the Trump presidency has basically had their reputations ruined. Nikki Haley's the only one who came out probably more popular than she came in, which is kind of a shame because Mike Pence was not a bad politician prior to the Trumpening. But unfortunately, Trump has a tendency to just poison everything he touches, intentionally and unintentionally. All right. Like, Unrissus TF, all right, peace. Are these randomized like the feel and good answers? Voshage, too many splits in early Shia Islam. It's like, there are lots of splits in early histories of religions. Christianity had a bunch. Christian Vibrecht, final question. Any chance for you to have a debate discussion with Emperor Tiger Star on various topics? I am definitely not a debate person. Debate is definitely... When I was younger in my college days, I was much more of a debate guy. But as I've gotten older, I realized debates don't really help anything. Discussions are far more productive, I think. So if I were, it would have to be a discussion. But even then, I don't know what exactly we would discuss. Let's see, Dr. Khan blog. I think if Trump won, because some Americans were tired of the good talkers but not good fighters in the GOP as compared to what they see as the toxicity in the Dems. That is true. One of the big things you always heard from Trump supporters was that, at least he fights. Because here's the thing. Activists within political parties always see their own political party as being like weak. It's like, oh, the other guy is always, they break the rules and punch below the belt and then they always win. Well, both Republicans and Democrats see that exact same thing about their own political side. Republicans, and I was seeing and saying that back during the Obama years. It's like, if only the Republicans would actually try to fight, they would win. And the Democrats have been saying that about their candidates for a long time as well. That's just the, that's just a thing. It's a thing, like, it's what you'll realize when you become a recovering activist like myself. Peku Alex, are the Empire and the Star Wars the good guys? The only good thing the Empire really did in Star Wars was end slavery, which is not a bad thing, but you end slavery and then you have everything else they did. Let's see. Mike Koss, Tea Party president and Tea Party cabinet. Perhaps Michelle Bachmann. Oh boy, Bachmann's a name you haven't heard in a long time. No idea. The Tea Party is a weird amorphous movement that I really need to make a video about. That Cats Fan 22. Do you think the current American political system works, or would it be better for the U.S. to adopt a new system like the parliament system that many Commonwealth nations use? I don't think changing the political system and the structure would actually solve that problem. Because, like, one of the issues with the parliamentary system is basically the governing coalition can basically do whatever they want without, unless you get a bunch of people from the prime minister's own party abandoned ship, they can basically do whatever they want. And they seem to have a much better track record at keeping people in line than congressional systems do. So it depends on what your priorities are. Like, I have a series of videos about like presidential republics versus parliamentary democracies that talks about this stuff. And so I don't think the problems America has currently in its politics would be solved by changing the system. Felix Vossage, John Kerry for president? Never. All right. Got about 2 minutes left here. Any last questions? Mike Koss, what if all state legislatures were like New Hampshire's? Many representatives. I do think expanding the number of representatives in Congress would help. Like, there's a couple episodes of the Jonah Goldberg's podcast, The Remnants, where he talks with a guy named Lyman Stone. They talk about expanding the House of Representatives to include many hundreds more people that might actually help the political process. So that is definitely one reform I would be in favor of looking at. Let's see. And Alex Winter, why do so many democratic countries choose parliaments? Well, it's because parliamentary systems originated before, the congressional system that the United States had, Like the British Parliament has existed in one form or another since the Magna Carta. Now, granted, it didn't exist in its current form back in the, 12th or 13th century, but it has existed in one form or another since then. And so that's the reason why. It's the system that most of them adopted in like the late Middle Ages. And so, before they were democracies, they were monarchies and they had their parliaments. And that's why they still have them today. All right. Dr. Khan blog, more congressmen? 435 is enough for me. Yeah, well, here's the thing. The more congressmen there are, the weaker each one individually is. That's something to think about. Are there other kinds of systems aside from parliamentary and congressional systems? Not much when it comes to democracies. You mostly just see slight variations within each one of those kinds. Felix Vossage, better history education in schools. Yes, and we can do that by listening how much we fetishize science. All right. All right, here's the last question from Mike Koss. Have you ever helped directly a local politician while running for office? Name if not necessary. Yes, I have helped a local election. I have participated in campaigns for a local city council member, local mayor, and congressman before. And so I'm afraid that is all I'm going to be doing for tonight. Thank you so much for coming to this stream, and we will be having another stream next month. So I'll announce that hopefully in the not too distant future. So until then, thanks for watching.